Cool. So let's discuss how this model is currently organized. So if we go ahead and look at our outliner here, you can see, first of all, I've got one solid group, one main group to go in and just keep everything inside of. I just got it called Bird Geo. Um, I've got all of the main pieces grouped under that. So you can see we've got wings, head, tail, body, legs, and then leather. In case something got screwed up and I needed to go in, and this is actually something that I misnamed or didn't, eyes glass, there we go. In case any of this gets unparented or I need to change this around in any way, I also have some display layers set up for myself so I can really easily select different objects and go in and still have a lot of that organization maintained. I've tried really hard to keep these groups pretty representative of how I'm going to want my main shaders to be as well. In my mind right now, I'm trying to get in here and plan a lot about how this is all going to come together. So you can see I've got, for example, my head group here and my wings. My wings group is really only the metal on the wings, thinking ahead that, I'll probably want all of my metal textures to be together. Same with the head. The body's all one piece here, and same with the legs. And then I've got my leather broken out into its own setup here. Something else to note, I've really tried my best on this to go in and get all of my shaders at least assigned. So you can see in the Hypershade here. It's a lot easier with organization like this if you just really start from the beginning. So things like naming and grouping and all of that. A lot of times when I open my students' files, you just see this huge list going down the outliner of all of the stuff in their scene. And all of that can be really, grouped down into a single group. And same thing with shaders. You can see I've got naming convention established where I do have, you can see we've got the shader name. So this is bird beak MTL for the material. And if I look at my shading group as well, I do have that named properly as well. I know for a fact that there's definitely studios out there where this kind of stuff is extremely important to them, and it's really on the look dev artists to go in and get that stuff sorted. So you really want to make sure that you're on top of your game with that. When you're creating shaders, there's nothing worse than having to pass off an asset early to someone else and you didn't name anything, and suddenly you've got 50 shaders all named V-Ray Material 1 in your scene. So you definitely want to go in, and you can see I really like to add the asset name or something at the front to identify it. So we've got bird wings, and everything's just bird. So there's the lock spinner, legs, leather, etc. If I look at my UVs that I've got set up, let's bring these guys over here. So if I go to my view and I go to my grid, I am going to turn on tile lines. And then I'm going to want to expand my length big enough so that I can see my UDIM tiles. So we'll do 10, so that looks good. And you can see I've got a little bit of funkiness here that I'm just going to describe the decision making here. So my main 8 tiles, I've broken out and got them laid out right here. These 3 pieces here, I actually just drug these up away from the main objects because I'm later going to need to be doing texturing on these separate, but I still wanted them to fit back into where they were supposed to go. So these guys here will need to get moved down a little bit because it's actually supposed to fit right back in there. But for right now, I'm got this separated out until I go in and figure out exactly where it's going to go. These two pieces here, again, are just really, if I look, they're actually two pieces that are inside, and, they were fine just being floating where they were. The UVs are not perfect. It's definitely, I will be the first to admit that there's room for improvement, specifically the place right in here where I pulled these two objects out of. I would need to reorganize that. And then I should probably just get these two metal pieces back down in there, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and move forward with it. And we can go back later if we need to and get these pieces placed down in there. So also with the UVs here, I've pretty much got them grouped similar to what are the materials that they're going to be, and also that corresponds back to the group. So you can see the tail is in really good shape. The body got split over two tiles, the legs, and then the leather. So that's looking pretty good. And if I went in here and I wanted to get this, if I look at my body, let's look at the UVs real quick. So let's actually grab this. So if I select all of these UVs and we just do a quick to shell and figure out which objects these all are, you can see that I've actually broken out all of these pieces that are going to be on the front of this little lock, because I was intending there to be a up-close shot of this piece. And so because I knew that I would need that high detailed look to this, I wanted to make sure that that piece had its own tile set up. This is definitely not a video game ready asset. It's much more towards a film quality asset, and that's another reason why I'm using the UDIM tiles. So one of the tricky things, speaking of with Substance Painter, as we discussed already in the intro, I am planning to use Substance Painter for this. And one of the difficult parts of Substance Painter at the time of making this video is that our asset has to go into Substance Painter with all of the UVs in 0 to 1 space. And so that means that you're going to need to go in, and if you're following along and doing this for yourself, it's definitely helpful to have some sort of script to help you with this. So let's do a new mel shelf. And it's not really a script, it's just more running a mel command. But you can see that I'm going to need to move this down. And when I do that, you can see that it spits out this poly edit UV. So I'm just going to drag that down. And rather than doing this negative 0.806, whatever I did, I'm just going to do -1. So with this command, you can see poly edit UV. I can actually go in and I can just use this, and I can select it and run it. And I can start getting all of my UV shells stacked up where they need to be. Same thing over here. And then, for this one, I need to go down 1 and over 1. So that would be like that. And you get the idea. So I'm going to need to go through and get all of these back to 0 to 1. This is the beak. So the beak, I want to make sure has its own tile actually. Again, I'll probably have an up-close shot of the beak, so I want to make sure that that's looking nice. So it'll probably be like that. And now that one would need to go down 2 and over 2. There we go. Once all of these are set up, I'm going to have that exported out as an OBJ. And that will be, if I go to my export selection and export out my OBJ, I do want to make sure I have all of my groups and materials turned on, and then that can get exported. It's also okay if you want to go ahead and add a single subdivision and make sure if you do that. So for example, if you wanted to send a smoothed version over to Substance Painter, you can go in and in your option box here for the Polysmooth, you do want to make sure, let's reset these settings. We're going to do 1, and we want to make sure that our UV boundary smoothing preserves the edges. So that will ensure that all of that edge geometry in the UV shell will stay exactly the same. So you can see if I hit apply. So my edges are all the same, but the internal geo is still getting smoothed. So for me personally, just to make sure that I had, because Substance Painter is going to be baking a lot of the normal maps and everything, I did not take this asset into ZBrush, so I didn't have that stuff coming in. I did choose to do a single subdivision so that it went in with a little bit smoother edges, so that it could bake nice normals off of everything. Because you can see if I was to send this over to Substance with that really hard line, it would be looking a lot worse than if I sent it like that. So that process, you might need to, bounce back and forth a little bit from Substance Painter to Maya to find something that you really like. But generally speaking, I actually on this piece, this asset, I actually smoothed every single piece once and sent that over to Substance Painter. And so you can actually see here, if I was to import, and let's go to our source images, Substance, and let's go to all files. You actually see in the file sizes in my working that I started out without that smoothing, and then I realized I needed it, so I actually ended up in the higher versions of my OBJ, I do have them smoothed. So you can see if I import this, and I look at this, this is rotated incorrectly. Yep, it's got 180 degree. Always make sure to double check that and get your rotations frozen, which I did when I sent it over. So let's go ahead and isolate. You can see what I'm talking about, that we do have a single subdivision on all of that. So cool. So that's going to be all of it for the model. And after that, we're going to go in and start getting our main kind of standardized look dev scene all set up.